Welcome to the Quasi-Chaotic Podcast, where Jesse Somber and I, Najib Al Chamaa, explore topics related to self-actualization, living to our fullest potential. We cover questions such as, what is a reliable way to facilitate serendipity? How can I be a better parent? How do I jump out of bed instead of loafing around for an hour like others do? And is my obsession with pineapple pizza a deeper sign of my existential crisis? Let's face it, we're all hustling and bustling, right? Grinding away, striving to meet our dreams and keep our loved ones' dreams alive. But amidst the hustle, how often do we pause and ask, what's the magic number? What's the enough in our more than enough? Is it a fatter paycheck, a sprawling family, a passport filled with stamps? And as you envision these, what are you willing to trade in return? But what if I told you that the end goal, the ultimate, is something you can grasp right now? In today's episode, Jesse and I wade through the sometimes hilarious, sometimes murky waters of defining enough. Because let's be real, sometimes our barometer for enough is as clear as mud, handed down from generations or dictated by that pesky neighbor's Instagram feed. And spoiler alert, you might just find your enough is closer than you think. So let's get it. Tell me about these videos you've been sending me that you're making me watch, because I'll watch them because you're a good friend, you know? So if you send me something, I will spend 13 minutes watching it.
Well, I don't want to waste your time.
No,
Like if you really think this shit, you just say, Jesse, man, you're wasting my time. When I'm like washing the dishes or whatever, I don't watch them, I listen to them, right? And
yeah.
and I really like this guy, Alan Watts, the philosopher. I like what he says. He's from the Western university sphere, but he studied in Asia, in China, Japan, India, that sort of thing. I like his thinking about life in the universe, but I saw that you questioned some of the things that he was saying, which doesn't surprise me at all. And in truth, you look at his life in real life, he did end up, I think, hitting the bottle pretty hard in later years, which isn't always a good indication that he's living. I think a lot of people might have certain beliefs or values, but like we've talked about before, there can be this cognitive dissonance where, if that's the right term, where you're sort of lying to yourself on an unconscious level and you think you're living that way, but in reality you're not. And so even with all that knowledge that he purports to have in lectures, that in the end, if he ended up hitting the bottle pretty hard and having a rough time, then you got to wonder how much he really connected to those ideas.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I listened to what he had to say, and he's a good wordsmith. Actually, before I say the next thing, I just want to ask you, from watching that video and just from listening to what this person has to say, Alan Watts, what did you take away from it? How has it changed your life?
Well, I always feel good when I listen to it because it makes me look at life in a different way, like looking at the entire universe. And well, not that a human brain can really handle the entire universe, but getting out of your own head and your ego and connecting with the energy that exists in everything and in nothing, paradoxically.
That sounds good and all. I mean, I'm nodding along. Again, when I was listening to it, it sounded, to me like ASMR. Honestly, much of it was a word salad to me, like he's using profound analogies and the darkness and the canvas and the light. And by the end of it, what the fuck are you actually trying to say? What are you trying to tell me? And it's all paradoxical, like you said. So, it's open to my interpretation. And maybe if I was feeling a certain way, I might subject what he meant by that one word in this other way. And it sounded profound, but is it really? And more importantly, what am I going to do differently moving forward? I suppose not everything needs to have some practical derivative, but just making me feel good is something I'm repelled by, because it's the lack of action that often comes after. that I take issue in, because
Mm.
we often find ourselves sulking in these ideas as a way to justify just how complex everything is, how the world is out there to get us, how it's so much harder than it needs to be, why it's so difficult to wrap my head around.
I don't know if
Uh,
that's what he's saying.
It's not what he's saying, but it's what he's alluding to, and maybe even unintentionally, because I mean, at
Mm,
certain points of the video, he'll say, well, you might not understand this now, right? And he's just
mm,
throwing like these facts left, right, and center, and then he jumps
mm.
to femininity, and then he comes back to this, and it's like, okay, what's the takeaway lesson here, right? Are you saying that God is within us all? Are you saying that, what are you trying to say?
All right. I think the takeaway lesson that I get from it all that I really like is how this essence of life, you can call it whatever you want, the universe, the great spirit, whatever. If it is called God, it's not anything like the gods that human beings often talk about in religion. It's just like an energy. And I like how certain cultures have proposed this idea that the universe is just like one giant consciousness, and thinking that we're these separate entities and that's all that we are. It's like a game, the universe playing with itself.
Again, that sounds good, but what is that based on? It's just maybe a nice interpretation. It's one of those things that would make me feel good if it were true, I suppose. But it's completely based on no scientific evidence whatsoever. It's based on curiosity, the unknown, uncertainty, and that's an interpretation, and that's nice. And of course, there's tens of thousands of religions out there that interpret the void of space in every which way. And I can attribute just as much veracity to these religions as much as to what Alan has to say about anything to do with the universe and the fundamentals of existence. And
I'm relating it to science when I listen to him. So think about quantum physics, right? Like quantum physics, not that I'm a physicist, you're laughing at me already. So the universe is made of energy, right?
sure.
And people study it, right?
Mm.
And you're going to say, well, dark energy and dark matter and these things are just theories, and they're just names for things. But there's been a lot of study about.
These are two very different schools of thought. Dark energy and dark matter, yes, we can't detect them, but we can see their effects. We can measure their effects with great certainty as well. But we can't observe them. We can't measure them because they're elusive for whatever physical reasons. But what does that have anything to do with, Alan's interpretation of where the universe came from and how we are part of this equation in some way beyond basic arbitrary evolutionary biology?
Mm,
Anyway,
well,
actually, this other video is one I took more issue with. This video, can you quickly summarize what
dude,
it's about?
he's talking about how the modern society, one of the main issues is materialism, and that people
Mm-hmm.
think that if they can get certain things or that express their status or that bring them joy, money and physical objects and things, big house and nice car, etc.,
Mm.
that they're going to feel complete and happy. But he's saying it's actually making us sick and that it's not a healthy way of living.
Mm-hmm.
What pisses you off the most about that one?
I'll tell you, I've thought about this. Here's my quick rant because there's going to be a few. And yeah, this episode is going to be about materialism. I'm sick and tired of these insufferable videos with their pompous British accented narrators and uninspired visuals. This guy, I mean, these people, they spew like elementary insights that you'd expect a fifth grader to realize at some point, only to wrap it up with the tired old, do what's best for you. It's okay not to be perfect spiel, masquerading as just some profound wisdom. Seriously, do you believe that the people actually watching these videos, this regurgitated content, do you actually think they'd be transformed by it? Or do you think they'll just revert back to the same envious, jealous, materialistic, narcissistic, and vain individuals they've always been? You know what I mean? Like when you tell me consumerism and capitalism, it's a poison, and you don't think the person watching is going to turn off that video and go back to, ooh, look at this shiny car I wanted so much? Or do you think it's going to leave like a lasting impact? Again, these things that sound good, they make us feel good. But when, we go back to sleep and we wake up, what are we left with? Okay, I get it. Like you might identify with what's being said and you might find value and empathize and, hey, somebody understands me. Sure. But like instead of indulging in like these broad complaints about life's hardships, I wish more would seek out and engage with content that drives actionable change. Stop telling me how bad the world is. Stop telling me how bad I should feel about it, and start telling me what I can do about it. And Yeah, it's different form of content, I suppose. But this is why I just don't give videos like this time of day because it's useless to me. I gain nothing from it. But let's jump ship to materialism. Let's jump into the topic of today's episode, which is how much is enough? How much is enough, Jesse?
I think it comes down to the individual. I think enough is having a roof over your head and having some food to eat each day and having a place to sleep that's fairly safe. Like you don't have to
Mm,
worry that someone's going to knock the door down and kill you in the night. And, you know, that you have access to good medical
mm,
care. And a lot of people want to feel like they're contributing to society. So a feeling of connection and inclusiveness and some sort of occupation or something that you do that you can feel contributes value to the world. I think those are some of the main things that you would want. And so having a fancy car and a big house and sending your kids to private school and collecting 25 types of really nice watches, you got to wonder, yeah, what is actually enough? What do we really need?
When I ask people this question, I often get a similar response, but the difference with you is I actually know that you believe the things that you're saying and you enact them. But for many people, they'll say what you said, but actions speak louder than words. When I see them act the way that they do and behave in the way that they do and the decisions they make, it's evident that they don't even know what enough is. And so some examples have to do with climbing the corporate ladder or expectations in a relationship or just material possession. We want more. So, for example, anyone climbing the corporate ladder, usually they do so because they feel like, yeah, they ought to, often exhausting their freedom and quality of life in the process. Investors, they invest and continue to invest because they ought to, amassing a wealth to no end.
Well, going to the corporate ladder, someone very close to me, it works in corporate. And recently she was told that she was going to go from what's called a level 5 to a level
Mm,
4 role,
mm,
although she would be paid the same amount and have less work to do, pretty
mm,
much. And the work is actually more enjoyable. It's a big hit on the ego for
mm,
most human beings to be so-called demoted in some way, taken a notch down on that ladder
mm,
that they're trying so hard to climb up. And you got to ask yourself, why are people trying to climb up that ladder so hard?
mm,
One, they think, oh, I'm going to get financial freedom one day. And what's financial freedom? Oh, well, that's
mm,
going to give me the ability to do all the things that I want to do. So then I can make time for them because I haven't got time for them now. And it gives them a sense of status and value that they're good at what they do and that
mm.
they have a purpose and they have value.
Yeah, so I want to involve the listener now because we've mentioned this idea of climbing the corporate ladder. Now, not everyone works in corporate, but a lot of them do. But even if you run a business, you're sort of aspiring for more in one way or another. Now, you've listed a few things, right? Which is status, material possession, reputation, and just more money for more freedom. But this takes us to the question of how much is enough. Because, yeah, why would this person that you know feel the way that they do, even though they're earning just as much money, doing less work, but for whatever reason, it deeply impacts their well being.
And they're
Um,
earning more money than most human beings on earth.
and if you look at the way they live their lives, oftentimes they're not even happy. And
At
by
all.
happy, I mean, what are they doing with their time outside of work? I had a similar conversation with a friend I know, and it had a lot to do with how underwhelming her life is outside of work. She's having trouble waking up and getting out of bed. And she was trying to figure out why it was the case. And she attributed a lot of the reasons to how boring her work is. But then I
Hmm.
asked her, well, what's your life like outside of work? Do you have any hobbies? Do you look forward to events that you're planning? Practicing anything else? Are you training? Are you studying? And of course, the answer was no.
Hmm.
And I got this blank look, this blank stare, which caught me off guard because how could you not realize that the reason you're feeling the way that you do is because what you're doing with your free time, what you're aspiring towards, is unknown. And you never stop to ask yourself, how much is enough? What do I want with this salary, right? What do I want to do with my time? And often we just default to societal expectations, right? To cultural expectations, to parental expectations,
Hmm.
right? Consider the segregation of the social classes, for example, right? The working class strives to be the middle class. The middle class strives to be the upper middle to millionaires, millionaires to multimillionaires, and so on. You see it all over TV. And what happens is maybe we get promoted, right? And so we acclimate to whatever standard of living we attain. And then we seek higher ground. That's just the nature of human beings. This is how we survive, how we adapt, how we overcome. And this is, again, what we know to be the hedonic treadmill, this recurring theme that we'll keep coming back to. Right? You might be telling yourself that winning $1 million in the lottery is all you will ever need and all you could ever need. And I hear these conversations at pubs and it's like, oh, well, if I win the lotto, here's what I'm going to do and I'll quit work and retire. But how do you know, for example, that your standard of living won't change? Money makes money, doesn't it? So why wouldn't you reinvest it, live a frugal life until you retire with your return?
That's the thing, though. Like, I know a lot of wealthy people, and the majority of them are still stressed because they make more money, but because they make more money, they spend more money, right? And so they have 5 rental properties that they have to take care of and be worried about instead of none or one. And it's like the more money they make, the more outlays they get for themselves. And so they still have to keep that treadmill going if they want to keep all those things happening.
Yeah, exactly. So if you win like $1 million, right? How would you feel if you found $5,000 on the side of the road one day? Right? Would it still have the same impact? What boggles my mind is how most people don't stop to think about this. When I bring it up to people, they do their best to avoid it. They will try their best to forget the conversation ever happened, wake up the next morning, and go back on the grind. You know why? Because when I am asked, hey, Najib, well, I'm after financial independence. That's what I'm after. I want to buy my freedom. I want to make enough money so that I don't have to work for anyone anymore. And they think this necessarily comes with, I don't know, say $500,000 in the bank or $1 million or whatever it may be. But when I suggest that you could do that right now, that's when they stop listening. So, for example, this radical financial planner, he's called Paul Armson. In his book, he put it best when he offered the straightforward approach to seizing financial independence. Here's what he said. Okay, he said, step 1, sell your car or sell your house, assuming you have one. Step 2, with the proceeds, get yourself a cheap flight to Kathmandu in Nepal. Step 3, take a short, cheap internal flight out of Kathmandu to Lukla. You'll enjoy the landing experience. It's not that great. Step 4, pop on your walking boots and head north. You'll eventually come to a little village called Jarasso on the west side of the Dun Kosi River, just south of Namche Bazaar in the spectacular Khumbu region. Step 5, take a right turn. You'll now be off the beaten track. After another 30 minutes, you'll come to another little village, your new home. Here you can buy yourself a little shack for next to nothing. What's more, with most of the sale value of your car or house still in the bank, you'll probably be the richest person in the village. There you go. You've seized your financial dependence. And yet when you put this proposition forward, goosebumps. Of course not. What are you talking about? I can't do that. Why not? Why not?
Because they think that, for example, if you live in a small village in Nepal, that they then won't be able to do the things that they really want to do.
Which are?
Let's say travel the world.
You can travel Nepal on foot.
Yeah, but what if they want to go to South America?
I want to go to Paris, Jesse. I want to eat a croissant and have a little Americano, if they even serve those. And then I want to go in the Eiffel Tower and take a selfie. I really want to do that, Jesse. Cognitive dissonance. That's what this is. You're fucking lying to yourself. Stop lying to yourself. If you really wanted financial independence, you would do that. And again, with that money, you could have a mansion, right? You'd have butlers. You can have whatever you want. And actually, you know what? A lot of people, when you actually push them into topics around retirement, right? They'll often talk about a cabin in the woods. I want to be off the grid. And again, it's the conversation changes, right? The topic changes, expectations changes, what they tell you changes, just depending on what best fits this mold they're trying to fit themselves into, this mold that they've grew up in, that has shaped their way of thinking and their inclinations and their intuitions. Because anything outside of the norm is scary, it's uncertain, is taboo, is to be different. And that, I think, is what most people are most averse of. And yet, the one thing they want.
I want to go back to something you said. You said that every human being, no matter what situation they're in, they want to expand, right? They want to grow, right? But when we're saying that in the topic area of materialism, we think, okay, that means I want to make more money, right? But like, why do human beings have this feeling that they want to grow, that they need to expand? And could it be done in other ways? And what other things could we expand or grow in ourselves that give us that feeling of fulfillment so we don't need to chase the money or whatever? Is there something else that we could focus on that would give us that same feeling?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Jesse, because this takes us to Psychology 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's where we start, I suppose. It's a good place from which to depart. Abraham Maslow, I think we mentioned in the previous podcast episode, he categorized human motivation in the following order. He studied people that were quote unquote successful to figure out similarities, and this is what he came up with. So the bottom level, he's got physiological needs such as food, water, warmth, rest, and safety. That's the first thing we are motivated to attain. And then above that, we've got safety needs such as personal safety, security, employment, resources, health, prosperity. Basically, you want to survive. After that, you've got love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. So there's these first three levels. There's two more, but we'll come back to them. The first level, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction, right?
Mhm.
Now, these things I just listed, don't they seem to be the main focus of what you see and hear on media? The Gucci, the sex that you hear about, the houses. It seems like we've evolved into this very bottom heavy pyramid where a lot of our motivation is derived from the basic necessities. And more of the same doesn't really get us far because now, if we're going to climb up this pyramid, here's what we end up with. So, we mentioned safety needs, love and belonging, and oftentimes that's where it ends.
There are a lot of countries in the world where if you're from a so-called first world country, which we won't even go into how stupid that idea is, but that if you go to one of these places, say you sell your house and car, you go to Costa Rica, you go to Nepal, you go to Bali or whatever it is, and you've got enough money to live for the rest of your life, why don't people do that? Well, one of the reasons is because we have this desire inside ourselves to belong and to be included, and so often you want to stick near the people, you want to be near your family, you want to be near your friends. You have to be a certain type of person to go to a place where you don't know anyone and feel like you can make a new life there, meet new friends, make a new family. I think the average person would probably be pretty scared of something like that.
Well, yeah, because they're so averse to change. They're so unfamiliar with difference, uncertainty. It doesn't have to be Kathmandu, right? You can go to Paris or now you've got a job overseas. Same thing. But I think that's another problem altogether. If you're introverted or shy or nervous and, changing the color of your shirt is too much to stomach. Yeah, I don't think traveling Kathmandu is for you just yet. But working our way up the ladder of change, I think that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, I agree with you. And yes, a lot of people would be averse to this. But again, if you really want financial dependence, stop pussyfooting around this conversation. And if that's what you really want, that's what you can get. No, you don't have to hack away, grind away for another 10 years, pushing paper around for someone you hate, whinging and complaining and crying and shedding misery onto those around you just because you're too much of a coward to actually action change. Now, these first three levels, I think this is because you asked me earlier, right? Well, if it's not this or that, then what can it be where we can derive motivation that extends beyond the immediate, the basic, right? The expected, the predictable. The two above it, first is esteem. And this is what people refers to as maybe popularity or stardom. Sorry, is what I meant to say. Respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, right? And you mentioned this person that their ego may have been hit because even though their love and belonging, safety needs, physiological needs are still met, have been met, they're earning enough money, for whatever reason, their well-being gets curbed so hard, and that's because esteem is much more sought after and much more harder to attain, and losing it is harder to manage.
Mm.
But again, for those that find themselves in an executive role in a place where people look up to, you're mentoring, those are a minority. But now there's something beyond this because as far as these four levels are concerned, the road to them is a given. It's known. You know what to do. Be the best musician you can be. Get promotions, work hard, be dependable, be a good leader. But what comes beyond is what will help surface these deeper questions that will help answer this question of how much is enough. This
Okay.
final level, this final tier that Maslow coined, is self-actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be. And this is where the conversation always breaks down. This is where I'm met with a blank stare from mature senior adults with families who have worked many jobs that have yet to make sense of what works best for them, what they want, what their full potential may be, because they've been so ingrained in these bottom echelons of this pyramid that they never gave time of day for these questions that actually keep them up at night, right?
Mm.
This is why we booze. This is why we work so hard. This is why I know some people, as far as the downtime is concerned, they need to fill it up with something because in the absence of distraction, and we spoke about this in the last episode, because in the absence of distraction, the truth of our circumstances is too much to bear. And whatever's bringing to bear this pain is a lack of an answer to the question of what is my full potential.
And obviously, everyone who's suffering that has this deep, it's something within themselves that's crying out. It's like, hey, you're ignoring me,
Mm.
the true self, you're ignoring me. Don't ignore me. Let's work this out. Let's find out what we can do to find a genuine joy in
Mm.
living.
And here's what it takes to burst somebody's bubble. When they actually achieve these things they're telling themselves they need, is when they actually get that promotion, is when they actually have that family, when they get married, when they travel the world and come back and they're left with the same questions. This is why this is such a confronting question and one that hasn't been as pertinent in the past, because in the past, people didn't have the opportunity to invest time in the bigger questions. They were just busy trying to put food on the table and avoid a bombshell, amidst the civil war. But now, with all that we're privileged with and the freedoms of the 21st century technological landscape and what it has to offer, our physiological needs are met, our safety needs are met, love and belonging. Whether it's an app or your friends, you just walk out the door, you can find all the friends that you want and esteem. There's all this talk about having a supportive workplace and recognition, and all these stuff didn't exist in the past. And so
Mm.
this is why I think it's one of the reasons why depression rates are at an all-time highs, because now we're confronted with a question that's much more harder to answer. And you could think this pursuit of self-actualization is climbing Mount Everest, because in the bottom bit of the Everest, right, when you're climbing, you could see
The
where
base
you're
camp.
headed. You know
Yeah.
where base camp 2 is. You can see it, right? It's there. But beyond and where the peak could be, where it is, that's uncertain, because think of it, it's like a shrouded mist. And whatever you're climbing up, you're not quite sure if it's in fact your peak, your full potential. Because the
Mm.
higher you go, the more subjective it gets, the more personal it gets. And so this is why when somebody asks you, what's your full potential? Nobody knows. You don't even know. It's something you have to discover. It's not something that you become, for lack of a better word. But this
Mm.
is where it gets crazy, scary, nobody knows, and everybody tries to avoid.
Wow.
So let's come back to the question of how much is enough?
Okay.
Because these bottom tiers, these bottom echelons that we pursue, that we sacrifice so much for, that we compromise our well-being for, our sleep, even the well-being of those around us. How much ought we sacrifice for what we don't even know? What are you working towards?
All right. For example, let's say I'm someone that likes to travel. Well, if I want
Oh,
to
I hate that.
travel, you hate that? Okay.
I hate that so much. Go on.
All right. But see, you're making assumptions about what I mean when I say travel. Okay. I like to go to new places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's still the earth, yes, but it's places where people live differently. So you're thrown into a different environment, which I like. You're out of your daily routine, which I like. You're seeing different cultures, you're eating different foods, you can listen to different music, you can do all these different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean by travel. And when I go places, I don't stay in hotels or anything. I like to stay in places where I can feel what it would be like to live there. All right. Is that
Mm-hmm.
traveling? I don't know. All right. But that's what I like. And if I want to do that in our society, you have to have a certain amount of money to pay
Mm-hmm.
for the airplane tickets, accommodation, etc.
My aversion towards travel has a lot to do with how I feel about what the masses do. When I see everybody walking a certain direction, my warning alarms go off.
Yeah. I know for a fact that you hate the idea of going to Bali. You've expressed that before in previous podcasts, and a lot of Aussies go to Bali, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I've been there over 10 times, right? Um but when I go there, it's different because we have people who we know. My wife used to be part of a Buddhist community from Bali.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhists are a minority there. It's mostly a Hindu country, even though it's not a country, a Hindu island within a Muslim nation. But our friend is actually a monk who lives in a village, right? There's no other foreigners there. And when we would go and stay there, we stayed in the back of a family's compound and we had a snake in our living room. I mean, I don't think that everyone who goes to Bali has that experience, because when I tell people, they usually shit their pants because they go stay in a big 5-star hotel and do, just the typical thing. But the point is, here, any place you go, you can choose how you're going to live when you're there, what you're going to do when you're there.
And you've just set me up for a slam dunk, Jesse, because that's the point exactly. How much is enough? So tell me, why'd you go to Bali? Why do you feel the need to go to Bali?
I go to Bali. Well, we usually go near a town called Ubud, which
No, but
historic.
why? Why do you want to
Why?
travel?
I like being around different cultures and different
You live in Melbourne,
situations.
Jesse,
Yeah, I know. Melbourne's a
but
great city. The weather's shit. Okay, like
so
it.
it's the weather now.
Well, I like to get away from this weather sometimes, definitely. But
Okay,
listen to me. Wait a minute. But I've gone to northern Queensland, right?
all
Say
right.
like Port Douglas or something, and
Mhm.
you go to a pub and they're racing cane toads and shit. That doesn't do it for me, right? Whereas going to Bali, these are very spiritual, they're very friendly people, right? And they seem very
Okay.
genuine. And usually, when you go to poorer countries, people are usually more genuine. They have less pretense, which is nice to be around,
Hmm.
because you'll hear a lot of people who work in corporate and Western society talk about how people put on these masks and faces and different personas, and they feel when you talk to them, it's all fake and it's small talk, right? So I like to get away from that.
Fair enough. Now, I understand that maybe your travel itinerary is more affordable, right? But you have to admit that many people spend an entire year working very hard to save up money to travel Europe, right?
Right.
Okay.
Europe's expensive. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now I come back to the question. How much is enough? Is those 8 months of hard work doing something you don't want to do worth that trip to Europe? And a lot will say yes, but what's the counterfactual? What's the alternative to saving up to go to Europe? You tell me, Jesse. What's the alternative here?
Well, what you're inferring just then is that anyone who's working is doing something they don't like.
Hmm.
Like, isn't there a percentage of our society who actually really enjoys their vocation, and it doesn't even feel like work to them? Or do you think that's a real minority?
No, I think enough people might enjoy what they do and then they'll enjoy the trip, and that's fine. But if the question is self-actualization, living to one's fullest potential, and that's the question that keeps people up at night, if we're taking that as an assumption, and for, by the way, some people, that's just not the case, being the average Joe and having a family and just nothing more, sure. We're not talking about that type of person. Again, as far as our conversations are concerned, they concern those interested in their full potential. So for people that enjoy their jobs and invest their hard-earned savings on a vacation, do you think they're living their fullest potential? It's a rhetorical question because you wouldn't know, and it's something only they would
Yeah,
know.
I wouldn't
And
know.
if that's all you want to do is maximize experience of different cultures, and then so be it. Do that. That's for you, and that's what you should do. But I'm not talking about these people. I'm talking about, I'd say, the bigger majority of people that, again, sacrifice a lot, don't enjoy what they're doing. And this is a big cohort of people. These are
Mm,
the type of people I want to address. They sacrifice a lot because they want to travel, as opposed to, for example, taking a pay cut, working as a landscaper because that's what they truly enjoy doing, as opposed to working in a data scientist at a bank.
mm.
That's what I'm trying to allude to. This is what I'm trying to shift the conversation towards, is what's wrong with that, right? Why do you have to work this job that you don't like to earn this money, to invest it, to spend it in something that's very expensive, when you could just do what you want to do every single day and look forward to waking up doing the things you enjoy doing? And if you want to travel, Australia's a big place. You can
Mm.
walk, you can get a motorbike, you can drive, you can ride, right? You don't have to justify and rationalize all this.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say. But what I want to know is this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, level 5, right?
Mm.
Self actualization. Why doesn't everyone want to live to their fullest potential? Well,
Because we don't
like,
talk about it.
yeah, but just because you don't talk about it doesn't mean deep down inside everyone there isn't a desire for it.
But there's this misguidedness. Yes, you're right. Everyone has this desire to excel. There's some level of ambition. Not everyone is as industrious as everyone else, sure. But everyone is sort of striving for the better. Robert Browning, I may have mentioned this in another podcast episode, but it's relevant here. He's an English poet. He said, a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? This desire for more, this desire to push ourselves forward. I think everyone has this, but what I'm trying to get to is this misguidedness.
Yeah.
Whether it's because of a lack of knowledge or exposure to the idea in schools and families, and I
That's
think it
what it
has a
would
lot to
be.
do
I
with that.
mean, because it looks almost like people have taken this natural urge inside ourselves to become the best that we want to be, and they've translated that as I want to get as much money and status as possible, right? That's how it's been sold to us in media, in our society, even in our
And family.
education.
Yeah,
Right.
why can't you be more like Michael, Jesse? Look at Michael. He's got 2 houses. He's got a six-figure job. Look at him. He hangs around with like super famous people. Look at the watch he wears, Jesse. Why can't you be more like him?
Right. And then you start to doubt yourself and question yourself and think, geez, I was doing some fun stuff. I was playing instruments and I was like doing martial arts and everything. And nobody seems to care about that or value it. Am I a loser
Hmm.
because I don't make as much money as all these other people?
Exactly. So, listener, please, for the love of God, okay, just take a moment, just 5 minutes today. Stop and ask yourself, do I truly enjoy what I'm doing? Do I go to sleep and wake up thinking about this passion of mine that I've somehow monetized, whether it's a job, a profession? And if you're not, ask yourself why you think that has to be the way. I'm right now on the side studying psychology after
Mm.
work, right? In between all of the million things that I do. Why am I regarded as being an overachiever or innately curious? Why isn't it something everyone does, right? Just because you did a degree in data science doesn't mean that your entire life necessitates data science modes of operation. You can
Mm.
do something else. And if you are resorting to Netflix and chill because, well, I don't want to study after work, it's boring me. What makes you think that what you love and enjoy doing is boring and it's not something you want to do even after 9 hours of work?
I think, Najib, some of this comes down to identity as well. When you meet someone in our society, usually one of the first things they ask you is, what do you do? Right. And then you say, I'm a doctor, or you say, I'm a data scientist. And you put yourself in a box, and then they know how to judge you and how to treat you. And you have this identity, and it goes around with you like you're carrying it around with you. And a lot of people think, this is who I am. I'm a data scientist. I can't change that. That's what I studied. That's where I've been working. What do you mean I can go change and be a landscaper? Like, that's not who I am, because they now believe that this thing that they've been doing is who they are.
Mm, that's what defines them. And this takes us to the illusion of self. I think that is one of the big issues hindering our capacity for change. So, this self illusion thing, this people, this identity that people have convinced themselves of who they are. I'm a doctor, I'm a husband, maybe I'm a supportive husband, I'm a liar, I'm a cheater, whatever it may be. The self illusion, it refers to the illusion of what one may assume to be a coherent self identity, which is in fact a figment of one's imagination. If one cognitively opens up to the present moment, if you really sit there and think about what you are, who you are, one quickly realizes that they are nothing more than an observing consciousness, and that whatever identity they believe to be true only comes into existence when they think about it and play out that role. I can wake up tomorrow believing that I don't have anxiety, and it can work, but you really have to believe it. You really have to believe that these things in the past happened for the reasons that they did, and you made these mistakes and you were wrong, and there's no turning things around. And if you're left with these thoughts every morning, if you've convinced yourself this is just who I am, I'm this lying husband, that's what you'll always be. But we are in control of these stories we tell ourselves. And maybe I'm not a doctor anymore. Maybe I never was a doctor. Have you considered that alternative? And if, again, what you've committed yourself to doesn't tickle the cockles of your heart every moment of every day, of course, there'll be, highs and lows. But I'm talking about genuine excitement, stuff that's going to get you jumping out of bed, then what you've committed yourself to is probably not what's best for you. And hey, spoiler alert, what you think is what's best for you is going to change eventually anyway. Okay, what does that tell you about the way you've been living your life and how you ought to be living it?
I'm sure you've asked these questions to a lot of people, Najib, because this is like fundamental to how you travel through the world. And what you're thinking about every day. Don't you come across a lot of people who say, mm, I can't really change. I'm trapped. I made some choices and now I'm stuck because I got to pay the bills and I got to do
Mm,
these things and I've got kids and all this stuff. What do you think of that reasoning or that excuse to not try to fulfill your highest purpose or
potential.
ambitions?
Yeah, look, there's a spectrum of circumstances, and some are more difficult than others. However, this is where we start treading into unethical territory, unethical waters, because what is ethics to begin with? What is morality? Well, Najib, I can't commit to this one job because it means I have to travel and I have a pet. Let's start there, Jesse. I have a dog, and this dog I've had for 6 years. I'm really
Yeah.
close with this dog. So, what are you willing to sacrifice now? What are you willing to compromise?
Yeah, I
That's a
have a friend who
decision,
never travels because he has two dogs. Never travels.
and that's fine. And again, the listener might be thinking this is a very heartless thing to insinuate, but that's your decision. You're not really trapped. You're just conflicted.
Mm.
Let's up the ante. Your only form of education is data science, just because we've been using this example. You're a data
Okay.
scientist and you have no other qualifications, and yet you
Hmm.
despise your job. Well, Najib, how can I commit to an education and just leave this work when
I
I have
got
a
a
mortgage
mortgage to pay, right?
and I have a mortgage? Yeah, that's right. Again, you're left with a decision. How important is this house? Why
Mm.
can't you resort to living in a shared apartment, even if you're at the age of 35? Even if
Hmm.
you are, what's stopping you? Your ego? Your family? What would people think of me? Is that
Hmm.
really your excuse? Is that really what's going to keep you from realizing your full potential? Just because I don't know what they're going to say about me, Jesse. If I live with other people at the age of 35, I'd be a loser. Well, no, you're a loser because you're a coward. That's why. Because you're refusing your own freedom, right? To deny one's freedom by relying on the one thing that's leading to this denial. That is to live in bad faith. And to be honest, I don't have much respect for people after having had this conversation with them and that
Mm.
decide to go back to their normative. Honestly, it says a lot about maybe their character and what they're willing to do. And in circumstances like that, situations like that, when I'm ever asked for further advice, I just say, I don't think you're ready for change. I think you need to marinate in the suffering a little longer. I want you to wake up one day, again, at an old age, and ask yourself, what the fuck have I done? And maybe then you'll grow some balls or a vagina. I don't know. What's the politically correct alternative to this? Um, Maybe you'll cultivate that courage you need to stop giving a shit what other people think and for once do what's best for you. How much is enough, Jesse? Now, let me give you a number because if we're talking about salary and money, of course, we have to mention the study.
Yeah.
You know how they say $75,000, that's what the threshold is. And by the way, that translates to about 138,000 Australian dollars in 2022, if you take into consideration inflation from when this study was conducted.
Okay.
$138,000 is what they say is the threshold for which there's diminishing returns for one's
Hmm.
well being.
Yeah.
Okay, now a lot of people, a lot of listeners will go, well, I'm not earning anywhere near that. So I ought to sacrifice more and more for a bigger salary. You're mistaken. Because if you have been completely deaf to everything we've said so far, then you'd know maybe it's not worth sacrificing more of my freedom, more of my time for more money.
Mm.
Simply recognize that you may not be that far off the upper limit, and compromising freedom of experience to inch closer may be counterproductive. So self-actualization does not indubitably come with a $96,000 price tag US. And compromising endless wealth accumulation does not equate to endless happiness. Right? So if we're talking money, because I know some people, mainly people that grew up in collectivist Middle Eastern Asian cultures, when you bring up $138,000, they're not really thinking that. They're thinking buildings. They're thinking of Fortune 500 companies. And a lot of them do think this way. You'd be surprised. Putting a threshold there could offer some solace because it's like, okay, it's just that much. Fine. I can just work to become an executive. I don't have to try and set up this startup company and risk everything that I have. I mean, if that's what you think is best for you, go for it. But there's this other study that was conducted, and they found that income satiation extends beyond the $95,000 mark US. And in some areas, that number is actually associated with lower life evaluations and levels of well being. right? So they actually say, no, it keeps going beyond that. But the authors posit that after this threshold, people may be chasing after material gains and engaging in social comparisons that could lower their sense of well-being. So just because they're hanging around more wealthy people, now they don't feel as wealthy, and therefore I should earn more, yada, yada, yada. Move to Kathmandu, problem solved.
So I'm a bit older than you, Najib, and so people have said to me like, Jesse, how much money do you want to have when you stop working, when you retire, when you're old? You know, yeah, you can get by on not very much now, and that's fine. But what about when you're old and infirm? If you don't have enough money, then how are you going to take care of yourself?
Yeah. That's what this idea of retirement, that should be another 10 podcast episodes in itself. Retire from what? What are you retiring from? If you're retiring from a life that you hate, you've been living life wrong altogether. End of story. What are you
Well,
retiring
I
from?
hope to work. I hope to work until the day I die, right? Because I
Fuck
enjoy it.
yeah.
But what if I become infirm? What if I become incapacitated or whatever? If I didn't earn a certain amount of money, then will society not take care of me? You know, will my family not take care of me? Will there not be enough?
How much is that? How much would that cost? So recently I've been talking to a friend of mine. He's a senior business analyst, and he's helping me managing my finances using a spreadsheet and different bank accounts and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things he advocates is having an emergency account. And basically it's 10 months worth of no work, and, maybe get in a car accident and there's no one there to take care of you. If that's your worry, Jesse, hey, why not go figure out how much it would cost for an aged care subscription? And if you're going to become a vegetable, like, I don't give a shit where you put me. Actually, euthanize me. If I'm a vegetable, euthanize me. But figure out what that number is, get that bank rolling, and
Mm,
continue living life the way you want to live.
mm.
Right? Is that too hard to do? Too hard to manage? What is that number? Figure it out. Do it. And then there you go. You've given yourself permission to not fall victim to this fear rhetoric of, retirement fears.
To be
For all
honest,
these
this fear is being imposed on me by people who love me. I don't even think about it very much, and they find that problematic that I'm not thinking about the distant future.
Well, maybe you should think about it. Get that emergency bank account going and put in 5% of your wages or salary, whatever, into it and go there. I'm
Mm.
doing something about it. Now, will you shut the fuck up and let me mow this lawn because I love mowing lawns? There, just do that. And I guarantee they will come back with another excuse, with more to ask for. Oh, well, don't you want to retire in a vineyard and somewhere in the middle of Sicily? It's like, okay, well, you keep moving the goalpost here. Well, what do you want from me? Right? I'm trying to live my life. You're miserable, right? You're living a life that you hate, and I hate that you hate it because I have to put up with all the bullshit you always spew on me and vicariously try to push through my life. You're living a life you don't want. I'm living a life I want. Okay, so
Mm.
one of us here is right and the other is wrong. I've got an emergency account. Just go away. Leave me alone. Stop talking to me now. And let's go back to this whole concept of, well, Najib, I feel trapped. I can't do the things you're asking me to do. Because we start with a dog, and the next, what there was to lose is making a career shift with no other education. But let's up the ante even more. Let's say, well, Najib, look, I live in a country where it's a very closed country. It's not an individualistic country. There's a lot of pressure. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe it's religious. Maybe there's misogyny involved. Maybe there's sexism. Maybe homophobia. And you say,
Mm.
Najib, I can't express my sexual needs in the way that I see it because I'm trapped. I can't do anything. And I go, well, why don't you work your way out of the country into another? Well, family. My family
Mhm.
needs me. Do they really need you?
I don't know. Maybe sometimes you would
Maybe.
think.
And
Hmm.
maybe if they did, maybe if you leaving is a betrayal, let's take it all away. What are you willing to lose? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to compromise to live to your fullest potential? Yes, it's a very selfish perspective. But again, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. Do I want to live a miserable life and die being miserable? Again, shedding misery onto everyone around me. Or do I want to live for myself? And maybe, hey, you move countries and then you start doing the work that you want to do and you have a bit of money and you can send that back and take care of them. Maybe
Mm.
this depression is what's preventing you from.
Maybe they'll follow you to that other country. Yeah, well, I mean, let's get back to the question of how much is enough, right? Now,
Mm,
you talk to a lot of people about this stuff. when you talk to the average person in our society, when you walk up to them on the street or whatever, or see them in a restaurant or cafe and you ask them how much is enough, what do you think the usual answer is? What do people most people think is enough? Is it just money, or is it fame, or is it like followers on Instagram or YouTube, being an influencer? What's enough to most people?
It's never anything specific and it's almost impossible to attain.
That's going to cause a lot of suffering if it's not able to be determined. And if you don't have something to aspire to that's very specific, is that why you're saying everyone's, not everyone, but a lot of people are depressed?
It's vague enough for them to dream about and vague enough not to do anything about. That's what I'm always confronted with is
Mm.
I want financial independence, perhaps. I want a big family. I want to retire early. These broad, very generic, vague ideas of what they want. But the better question to ask is, well, what's your full potential?
Mm.
That's always going to leave people on the back foot. It's always going to be very confrontational. And there's going to be a lot of ums, a lot of likes, and a lot of pushback.
Is that their fault though? Is like if they grew up in a household, in a society, in an education system, and all this that never talked to them about living to their full potential, then you got to wonder about the foundation that they're working from.
Yeah, look, that doesn't help, but honestly, I'm tired of giving other people the benefit of doubt. In this day and age, when I talk to people, when I sit down and talk with them, when they listen to this sort of podcast, when they read my book, and they're still doing what they don't want to do, operating the same way. And when I ask them why don't you want to? And they go, no, no, I will actually do it this time. And they keep coming back to it. It's just fear. It's just cowardice. It's just conformity. It's just wanting to belong. And it's more comfortable to appease everyone around me than it is to go my own way. That's what it comes down to. Yeah, unfortunately.
Why do you think human beings as a species, if we're the most evolved species on this planet and we're supposedly pretty intelligent, we've done like CERN Hadron Collider projects and these sort of, we're talking about going to Mars. Why, as a species, are we so afraid of everything? Why are we afraid?
Because we're still monkeys with language and an imagination. That's why. We're not evolved. We're still monkeys, man. We're still tribalistic. We still want to conform. We still want to belong. Our amygdala is still too big and we still react irrationally to things that are obviously not affecting our immediate physical well-being.
Are you picturing a society like, let's say, 100 years from now, right? Let's say all human beings on the planet are living to their full potential, right? I don't know if that's possible, especially looking at how things are. But let's say everyone on the planet was living to their full potential 100 years from now. What would that look like to you? And would that mean there would be a lot less fear in the world? Would we have evolved as a species? Would we still be connected and inclusive and have this sort of collective consciousness where we all working together towards aspiring towards things? What would it look like to you, Najib?
Honestly, questions at that scale bore me. I haven't put much thought into it. I'm more concerned with the individual as opposed to the collective. But yeah, I think a society where people are doing what they want to do, living to their fullest potential in their own individualistic way, it could be anything. It could be, I really, really love making pizzas. I don't have to be a professor at a university. I think that's going to make the world a better place. But whether that's actually true and logistically, if that will work, I don't know. And to be honest, I don't care.
So you're looking at this just from the individual, but you know that when talking about individuals, you're relating to everyone that exists and that who hears you speak.
Maybe I can broaden it to a level of family. Maybe there would be families where they're encouraging their kids to be what they think is their full potential is. And if they take interest in anything, the parents put interest in it too, and they encourage change. And as far as pressure is concerned, they just pressure them to try their best. As long as they're enjoying what they're doing, I want you to try your best. I don't care what it is that you want to do. You want to be a TikTok influencer? All right, let's wake up every morning, 9 a.m. Let's get that camera rolling. You said you want to be the best. You said you enjoy it, don't you? Yeah, okay, let's do it. 2 weeks later, like, I don't want to do this anymore. All right, let's find something else. As long as you're pushing them to make the most of every minute, every day. I mean, not to the point of exhaustion, although simplicity is a form of change in itself. But that, I think, is a future I want to live in.
It sounds like this idea of self-actualization would connect with the idea of authenticity. Would you say the pursuit of fulfilling your full potential is in direct correlation to being your authentic self?
Authenticity, autonomy, and forwardness. These make for a path towards self-actualization that I would actually agree with and champion. However, that's going to be for our next podcast that is all to do with happiness. But look, listener, as far as this conversation is concerned, again, we want to leave you with questions. And I know it's going to hurt to think about, and I know maybe this is something you want to run away from. And I know there's every form of acrobatic cognitive dissonance you'd love to do to dance around anything but doing something about the situation you found yourself in. But for once, ask yourself, how much is enough? Write it down, figure out what it's going to take to get there. And if you're doing way more than you need to attain this, then maybe consider changing your job, changing who you surround yourself with, changing who you've committed yourself to.
What kind of car do you want to drive? Do you want to ride an electric bicycle? Do you want to hang out with the guys at the Aussie Rules, or do you want to go to an opera? How much do you want to learn about other cultures? Do you want to learn other languages? What's the perfect salary? How many bedrooms do you need in your house? How many toilets?
And no, it doesn't have to come with $6,000 plane ticket and a $10,000 itinerary, because if you want to learn about culture, there's books. Okay, there's videos for that. Oh, that's not what you want? You want it's the cuisine? Okay, well, let's say we're living in Melbourne, Jesse. There's every cuisine you can think of. Oh, okay, so it's not the cuisine then. Oh, it's just the plane. You like the flight. Okay, well, why don't you fly to Sydney? Oh, it's not Sydney then. Oh, it's the weather. Okay, well, why don't you fly up north? It's not the weather then. What the fuck is it that you want? Stop doing what you think ought to be done just because other people are doing it. And ask yourself how much is enough. And maybe, just maybe, you can start working yourself towards what your full potential can be.
Okay, so we're going to finish this off here, Najib. All right. Do you want your own airplane? Do you want to drive a Lamborghini? Do you want to have the trophy woman, the beautiful woman with the red dress in the Matrix? Do you want to have so much money invested in so many things that you just don't know what to do with it? Is that what you want in your life?
No, I don't, Jesse.
I meet a lot of people who do. I see a lot of people who do. They want to make $1 million in a day, and they sell that idea to other people, and they make money from it.
And you know what we tell people like that, Jesse?
What do we tell people like that?
We tell them to fuck off.